We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We talk about everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please consider subscribing to our channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and friends. Do not forget to ring the notification bell. We could come on live at any time. And today, we're coming on early. We are coming on early. Although we did give a hint of that yesterday at the end of our live show. But you never know when we're coming on next to cover everything in college football. In the off season, during the season, so you got to make sure you ring the notification bell. If you want to support this independent national college football's rebel outpost with a donation to help us keep the lights on and grow the channel, just hit that $sign where you make a comment, and I will get to your super chat as quick as I possibly can. Welcome everybody into the studio that sits on the corner, the very corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to become a legend with your comments and with your phone calls. On our last night, we had a very lively show. We were chopping it up, talking about these NFL scouts, discussing the next quarterback class that could be entering the NFL draft in 2027. Very interesting conversation. If you missed it, go check out our live show from yesterday. Our today's show is going to be on one subject only. So the phone lines are going to be coming alive early. So get your calls in. Remember, if you call us at 763-260-1333, and no, the phone lines are not open yet. They will be open at the end of the monologue. If you give us a call, the floor is completely yours. You do not have to talk about what we're going to talk about today. You can rip on my beloved Minnesota Golden Gophers. You can elevate whatever team you root for. You can talk about the week 1 games. You can give me your predictions on the playoffs. Whatever you want to talk about on a phone call, the floor is completely yours. On a super chat, the floor is completely yours. Talk about whatever you want to talk about. We will discuss it. The other comments in the comments section, I will get to them based upon if it's relative to what we're talking about, how interesting I think it is, and the creative writing skills that you display in your comment. All right. But today's show is going to be about one thing, and that is the Ross Dellenger article on 3. Pretty interesting. A lot of this we've discussed here at Peek Around the Corner. Some of this was in a Cloak and Dagger episode for members only. And then later on, we talked about it for everybody. We gave the people the peek around the corner that the state of Florida was active. We talked about certain powerful people at Clemson were active. In this article, it also brings up that Stanford was active. And some of you might be asking, what are you talking about, Greg? Ross Dellenger's article of today, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, and Stanford, at some point in the spectrum, from severe to maybe not so much, put pressure on their in-state legislators, put pressure on Congress to take down the anti-expansion provision in the Protect the College Sports Act. So, and it does not come as a surprise to anybody. Florida State, once again, very, very active. We did cover that story at the Board of Governors in the state of Florida. Not liking the anti-expansion provisions in the bill. And it wasn't just Florida State. It was Florida International that was against that part of the bill. And of course, Miami is against that part of the bill. And Miami has been active. And Clemson, we even gave out a couple of names. One being Nikki Haley. So Clemson has been active in trying to get the anti-expansion part of the bill ripped away. Now, I will say this. Ricky Tungate, $10 holler. Thank you for starting us off. Ricky Tungate, Mr. Hooja. Mr. Hooja. Ricky Tungate, watch later this, Greg. I appreciate you going to watch this later, Ricky Tungate. I appreciate it so very much. And again, I appreciate your incredible generosity, supporting this channel, helping us keep us going, where we can do a live show every single day. I appreciate it, Mr. Tungate. But again, I'm going to warn you, October 31st, buckle up, Tungate. Buckle up. All right. Thank you for starting us off, Tungate. I'm reading the comments here in the chat, and I understand. I'm going to have to go back in the time here. Jeremy Norick, I appreciate the comment. We don't use caps, though. Don't use caps in the chat. Gee, I wonder why Stanford is pushing against the anti-expansion regulation. Notre Dame tag team partner to the Big Ten. Could be. I don't think that's why Stanford did what they did. We'll get into it. We will definitely get into it. We're going to get into all of it. I see there are... Florida man, UNC doesn't have a spine. Is it because they don't have a spine, or is it because they do not have the political space to be able to pressure their in-state North Carolina legislator to go to bat for them, to try to tear down that wall, to try to tear down that anti-expansion provision? Now remember, we did a live show in which we had that wall, 19-5 wall. It was scribbled on the wall. And it was Notre Dame and Ted Cruz standing on the other side of the wall. And it was Osceola, it was the Seminole, up on the wall saying, tear down this wall, the 19-5. We know that Florida State has been engaged. We know that Miami has been engaged. We know that, look, we were told, we were told that there were people who are running for Congress this year who were invited to the University of Miami, and they discussed the PCSA and the anti-expansion provision of the bill. We've known all those, the Clemson, the Florida State, and the Miami. The Stanford, a little bit interesting. We're going to talk about it. But since this article came out, and a lot of you haven't seen it, and we're going to show it to you. Since this article has come out, I have asked a few questions to a few people, and I'm going to give you what I can. The 4 schools that were mentioned that use their representatives to push to try to take down the anti-expansion provision of the bill, we believe at Peek Around the Corner there was more than 4. There was at least a 5th school. In fact, we reported on it, and then about 5 hours later, it was proven to be the case. Georgia Tech also picked up the phone and rallied against this provision. And we said it at the time. This was even before we did the University of Minnesota show. This was before we even did the Yellow Jackets Momentum show. This was in a show a few days before all of that, where we described how Georgia Tech was picking up the phone and there were people in Atlanta, a senator that was going to be against this bill, and then 5 hours later, one of the senators, Warnock or Warlock, or I don't know his name, he came out and he's against the bill. Georgia Tech has been active, so there's been at least 5. Could be more. Now, it is interesting that Ross Dellenger felt comfortable enough to mention 4 of them. I will also going to make sure everybody kind of understands this. There are 2 different lists. There are 2 different lists. And I'm reading X, and I think people are getting the 2 lists mixed. There is the ACC schools column of schools that objected to the Section 205 provision. That's the 19 plus 5. A cap number on conference membership at 19. The 5 is the 5-year provision. You would have to be an independent for 5 years, and then you could go to another Power 4 conference if you are a Power 4 conference team. There was more than 4 or 5 objections to the Section 205 of the bill internally when the ACC had their discussion on the bill. This list is what are the schools, according to what has been told to Ross Dellenger, or what he feels like he can say, what he's not embargoed on. These are the 4 schools that actually went the next level and activated their representation, those repping their university, to go and to push against some part or all of the anti-expansion provision of the bill. So there's 2 different levels here. There's 2 different lists. There's more than 4 or 5 that objected to that part of the bill, Section 205. But then there's this other list that actually went the next level of activation. I'm going to warn everybody, I would not read anything into North Carolina not being reported that they did not use their rep to agitate to go against Section 205. North Carolina Chapel Hill is not in position to do any of that anyways. North Carolina is not going to do anything that ruffles the feathers of the Board of Governors in the state of North Carolina. They're not going to do any of that. Virginia is not going to do any of that. And we reported that at the time they announced publicly that they are, that they congratulated Cruz and Cantwell and supporting them in trying to get this bill passed. Okay. Let's go to the roll call. And then we're going to go through the article, because some of you just still don't know what the heck we're talking about. And then we'll get to your comments, super chats, and phone calls. Senator Warnock. Thank you, Rod Nix. I keep forgetting what his name is. I apologize. I don't mean any disrespect to any senators out there. One more thing on this report. I haven't. There is something in this report that if I was a Kansas Jayhawk supporter who wanted Kansas to have the opportunity to jump into a P2, if I was a Utah Ute supporter who wanted their team to have an opportunity to jump into the P2, or any other Big 12 fan who wanted their university to have an opportunity to jump in the P2. There's something in this for you as well, this report. So we are going to go through it. And I don't see anybody talking about it on X. So we're going to talk about it here at Peek Around the Corner. All right, roll call. Roll call. Rod Nix is in the house. Fatal Gator. Florida Man. Azon the Kid. Rock Chalk. J Hog. Jose's in the house. Eric 6883. West Virginia. Let's go. Michael Hawkins. Let's go. Cam Cook. Let's go. Cal Bears is in the house. The Golden Bears. Old Dad is here. John Taylor, Daniel Gorby, Scott Glesner is in the house. Appreciate you coming on in. Who else is here? And why is not my board working? Go Rams, MGC Sooner, Bruce Harris, the Almighty, Jay Chapman, Dante's Inferno Purgatory, JD, BO 714, Gold Nose, we got the Wolverine, Marcus Williams in the house. Charlie Atwood, team of 24. Farmer Boys is here. I'm tired of all this heat, so I needed some Greg the Cold. You got 9 days left. You've all have only got 9 days left of Greg the Cold. After that, I'm going to be bringing the heat. I'm going to be bringing the gold. For those who are wise enough to listen to me this year, Greg the Gold is going to be your best friend. Movie Time Blues is in the house. Movie Time Blues. Mamba Duck, Clemson Tiger. I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. Hold on, everybody. Hold on. That is disappointing because I cleaned this whole studio. I took all the dust off all my screens, off the lights, off the camera, off the table. There's not a speck of dust in the studio, and here I'm about to sneeze again. Anyways, Mamba Duck Clemson Tiger is in the house. Corey 34 is here. Brian Knowles is here. Preston from Greensboro, North Carolina. Did Minnesota get their 7th kicker? Former New Mexico All-Conference kicker Luke Drewski, we call him Kicker D. We're going to call him Kicker D, has entered the transfer portal. 18 and 19 on field goals last season. So he is in the portal. And here is Goldie Gopher doing a dance. I put him in there. So there is a possibility, a growing possibility, that our beloved Minnesota Golden Gophers might have a field goal kicker that can actually make a 46-yard field goal. Let's go. It's not a done deal. He might go somewhere else. You Tar Heels might offer him some more money than we can. A lot of teams can offer more money than he can. But that field goal kicker, who had a great season last year, the special teams coach of New Mexico, which, by the way, Kicker D, his last post on X, gave his special teams coach, Del Bracco, all of the flowers in the world. That coach is now the special teams coach of our beloved Minnesota Golden Gophers. So, we think it's a possibility. John Teal is in the house. Eric Hill is here. AZ Buckeye 96 is in the house. Nick, the Virginia Tech Hokie, is here. Smile Time. Andrew French. All right. Mohr Simmons, Christopher Hooter. For all of you who I did not get to, I apologize. Thank you for coming on in. It's a Thursday, August 20th. It's another beautiful day to talk college football. We are 2 weeks away from week 1. Thursday night football. We're going to be doing a watch party week 1, Thursday night. And then, of course, week 0, we're going to be doing on, that's 9 days away. So it's coming. It's coming around the corner here at college football's peak around the corner. The tension is getting thick in the studio. All right. So I want to thank everybody for coming on in. Appreciate it. Helmer Henderson, $5 holla. If the Southeastern Conference takes Miami, does that keep the Big Ten out of Florida? Would Notre Dame consideration keep the Big Ten from taking FSU? I believe the Big Ten, this is going to get... Look, there is a reason why we are the most unpopular national college football YouTube channel in the country, even though we're growing like crazy. I don't know if you guys have noticed. Thanks to you all. But I'm going to say something here that's going to get everybody in the chat angry with me. But I got to tell you the truth. Because if I don't, why are we even here? The Big Ten has always taken in consideration what Notre Dame thinks and wants and believes in the future. I know that sounds pathetic. True. Does it sound weak? True. Does it sound like the Big Ten is always bending the knee to Notre Dame, just like the ACC? True. Does the Southeastern Conference bend the knee to Notre Dame to make sure they don't have a reason to lead the ACC or football independence and join the Big Ten? True. Is Notre Dame drinking everybody's milkshake? True. It's all true. Now, there are some forces, some economic forces, some structural forces that not even Notre Dame can completely control. And as of right now, the implosion of the ACC is something that Notre Dame can't quite control. Although they got close. If the PCSA would have passed with the 205 provision in that section in there as written, if that thing would have passed, that would have been the ultimate dream for Notre Dame. The ultimate dream. And I said that at the time. The ultimate dream for Notre Dame. This report that came out today from Ross Dellenger, which we're about to go through, that's not the ultimate dream for Notre Dame. And I will say this. And I appreciate the $5 holler, Hammer Hennison. Thank you so very much for your generosity and your continuous support for this independent national college football YouTube channel that is the true rebel outpost of all YouTube channels. And that is because of the great support that we get from you college football sickos every single day. we often talk about, and I will get to the article, I do apologize to everybody. We often talk about the impact of Stanford, on the decision making that Notre Dame makes. Now, obviously, Notre Dame, the decisions that they make heavily impact everybody. But we've often only focused on Stanford in relation to what Notre Dame does. And that's quite obvious. Everybody in the chat room knows. Everybody that hears the sound of my grating voice knows that if Notre Dame ever were to join the Big Ten and they would have some influence and impact in choosing their running mate, Stanford would probably be at the top of the list. It doesn't mean that it's a Notre Dame-Stanford combination 100%, no, but we all recognize the impact Notre Dame and their decisions have on Stanford. I apologize for the noise outside. That noise has been going on for 2 hours. So I could not wait to do this live show any longer. Hopefully that noise goes away. Anyways. But we have failed. And I will include myself at the utmost. We have failed to talk about the impact on Notre Dame on the decisions that Stanford could possibly make. I'm going to get to this more in the after we go through the article. No, it's easy to see Notre Dame's impact on Stanford. Stanford got a P4 lifeboat. Stanford got a P4 lifeboat because of Notre Dame. Now, you can give other schools credit if you want. You can give North Carolina State, they were the flip vote to make it happen. You can do whatever you want with that, but it was Notre Dame's backing to include a Stanford, a California, an SMU, to be proactive backfill to the ACC. That is the most simplest, straightforward impact that everybody can see that Notre Dame has had positive on Stanford. But there's been decades of positivity. Notre Dame has always wanted to maintain a relationship with Stanford, a relationship with USC. They've always been able to want to play one home game in the state of California every single year. That has always been their goal. Notre Dame has always wanted to play road games in front of the Irish fans, in front of their supporters across the nation, in Palo Alto to Los Angeles. So, Stanford knocking on the congressional door at the Capitol and saying, look, we don't want that expansion, that anti-expansion provision in the bill. What does that speak to? What does that mean? And what impact does that have on Notre Dame, if any? We are going to talk about all of that after we get to the article. I thank you, Hammer Henderson. Thank you so very much. Again, to get back to your question, the Big Ten would consider what Notre Dame felt about Florida State. And again, Notre Dame isn't all that high on Florida State, in private and in public. It does not mean that Florida State cannot be a Big Ten member. As I said, no doors are closed. No doors are closed. I truly believe that. I truly believe that. I don't believe any door is closed on Clemson. I don't think that SEC door is closed on Miami. The SEC door is not open for Stanford, but every other door is wide open everywhere. I just happen to think there's a stronger percentage chance that this door will open up with an invitation than other doors to. But nothing is imminent. Nothing has been done. Nothing signed, sealed, and delivered. There's been no wink, wink, handshake deals. Only, I believe. Now remember this. Remember this. All this is happening on the so how do I say this? All of this is happening on the backdrop after those elevated talks. After what Ross Dellenger described as the shot clock. After what we described here at Peek Around the Corner, a week before Ross Dellenger ever published that article, we called it the quick strike. So, I got to be careful. When I say nothing is done, nothing is set in stone, nothing has been signed, sealed, and delivered, I truly, really mean that. But there's also the other end of it. Some of these schools have a very strong perception of where they think they're going to land. Some of them are more positive than others, but all of them, not all of them, a handful of them have a very strong perception of where this is going. And look, I'm going to say this, and some of you are going to take this wrong. Some of you are going to, and this is going to be, somebody is going to put that out there in X, and somebody's going to say, Greg, he thinks he knows everything. I'm telling you, I don't. That's the point. I only can deliver you the positioning, some information we know is to be true. I'm about to say something that some of you are going to take it the wrong way, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think Pete Thamel's comments, I believe that Pete Thamel's comments on ESPN College Football Game Day podcast of just a few days ago that we covered on PATC. What he said was true, but what he said was stale. And if you missed what Pete Thamel said, go back a few live shows ago and we covered that from top to bottom. In other words, I don't think what he said comes out of a place of nimbleness, like a lack of curiosity. Now, some of you, I know it's good. Greg thinks he knows more than Pete Thamel. I don't know more than Pete Thamel, okay? I did not say that, but I know one or two of you are going to put it out there on X. Greg thinks he knows more than Pete Thamel. Not true. But there's a reason why, now we cover everything in college football. Like we cover everything in college football. Like on a daily basis, we cover everything in college football because you got to be nimble, you got to be quick, You cannot lose your curiosity. From the Aaron Philo, Trammell Jones battle that's going on, from the Frazier Brandon, George McIntyre quarterback battle that's going on, from Kirby Smart, how he's going to use Nate Frazier thing that's going on. Everything we talk about college football, we go after it, because things do change. Realignment never sleeps. The positioning never stops. And that's why we were able to break the USC story, the Colorado, all these stories that we have been on here at Peek Around the Corner, because you got to stay on top of it. You cannot put it on the shelf and let it collect dust and then just pick it off, open up the book and read what was said a year ago. It doesn't work that way. The Big Ten never expanded with a school many states away from their core. And that's why a lot of people didn't think they were going to take USC, but the story was there. Nobody, there was a lot of people that, no way is a Pac-12 school going to join the Big 12. Don't they know that the Pac-12 universe, don't they know they look at the Big 12 being lower? It ain't going to happen. Look at my charts. Look at my beautiful charts, my beautiful spreadsheets. But again, they lack the curiosity. Florida State and Clemson. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they ruffled a lot of feathers out there when they went to court. We reported that. We got dragged over the coals on that. It happened to be true. But the story, there's been a few chapters written since that story. And that's my best and only answer when people say, Greg, you cover everything. Like you are so intense in your coverage on everything in college football, including realignment, because you have to be, in my opinion. You have to. There is no replacement to that. So I think that Pete Thamel read a chapter that was written a year ago, 18 months ago. We're going to go through the article of Ross Dellenger, and then I am going to give you my take on it. After talking to a few people, I waited a little bit before that article was published. I wanted to get everything nailed down. We are probably going to do the Holy Smokes Theater update this weekend. Most likely Saturday night is all right for PATC. Or we're going to do it in the early afternoon on Saturday. All right, let's get to it. Marcus Williams, cloak and dagger for 21 months. My goodness. Thank you, Marcus Williams. I appreciate being a family member for 21 months. Very humbled. Very, very humbled. Thank you, sir. You are officially knighted college football's cloak and dagger. Greg, regarding Stanford, do they leave the Ivy Library system for BTAA? Well, that is like the that's like the $20 billion question, isn't it? The $20 billion question. I do not have an answer for that. Are they willing to? Could they? Yes. Yes, they've been in the mix. Stanford has been in the mix. There is some trust issues. There is some logistical issues. Stanford and California were looked upon as a possible Big Ten invites during the last wave. They did not have the votes. They did not have the support of the media companies, and I don't think they even had the votes. I know they didn't have the votes. Now you might be saying, Greg, how could the Big Ten presidents how could there not be enough votes to bring in a Stanford and a California? Well, first of all, Stanford and California are incredible schools. And the Big Ten presidents would love to have them. But it was not a viable option back in 2022. Oregon and Washington, there was just enough money and just enough votes, and Kevin Warren left office. There was just enough juice to get them in the boat. But there wasn't anywhere close enough for Stanford and California. Not that combination. Not that blend. They were looked at. There were phone calls, but it wasn't going to happen. The California Board of Regents member, I forget what his name is. Go ahead and Google it. Lieb was his last name. Lieb. Lieb. State of California Board of Regents, California, Berkeley, UCLA Board of Regents, something Lieb. I can't remember the guy's first name. He said, after they made the decision to let UCLA go to the Big Ten, and then you had that calimony tax coming back to California, he said in public, we tried to make it happen. And I'm paraphrasing, we tried to get the Big Ten to take a Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and California, but he said it ain't going to happen. So they went for it, but the support wasn't there. But Stanford has always been in public. Then Ohio State president, and I can't remember her name, and Gene Smith, when they had a press conference, when it was reported that USC and UCLA were joining the Big Ten, Ohio State president Gene Smith, they had a press conference, and you go back and watch that. The Buckeyes, when they brought up the possibility of the Big Ten bringing on Stanford, Ohio State was all for it. But they just couldn't get it done. Now, we know here at Peek Around the Corner that unlike all the other Big Ten expansions, this one, the Buckeyes are calling the shots. As long as they can get 13 votes out of 18, which they're probably going to be able to get. There's still got to be some coalition building. There's still got to be a buy-in, of course, with the media companies. But the Buckeyes are calling the shots. And if there's any Western expansion that the Buckeyes would support over others, it is Stanford. But again, the Big Ten is looking at 19 and 20 to get into the southeastern part of the country. That has been their goal for years. Let's go through the article because I want to talk more about Stanford. There's way more to talk about Stanford on, and Florida State, and Clemson, and Miami. All right, let's talk about it. And we're going to talk about Big 12. I think there's we'll talk about the Big 12. We'll talk about the Big 12 as well. All right. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure I'm caught up on the super chats. I am not. I apologize. Hold on, everybody. We've got Christopher Hooter, $5 holla. $5 holla. We will get to that article. But the super chats keep us running. It keeps the lights on. I very much appreciate your support. Christopher Hooter, Mr. Purple and Gold. The SEC can't take everyone. SEC primarily wants new contiguous states. North Carolina, Virginia, Kansas. That's more important than doubling or tripling up in Florida and South Carolina. $5 holla, Christopher Hooter. Again, I'm going to get yelled at by some of you. But I think there is a hidden possible good news for Rock Chalk Jayhawk in this article. And possibly a couple of other Big 12 schools. We will get to it. Thank you, Christopher Hooter. Thank you for the $5 holler. Appreciate it very much. We've got Noah Berman, a member for 8 months. My goodness, Mr. Berman. I appreciate it. You are knighted officially. College football, cloak, and dagger. Noah Berman. My dream of reuniting the pack lives. Stanford to the Big Ten. Okay, this will be my last comment. This is going to be my last comment until we get through the article. I promise you. I know I rattle on, but there's so much. Again, we're different here at Peek Around the Corner. We're not for everybody. We're not for everybody. You cannot be a college football casual and like this show. Because you're not going to like my singing. You're not going to like my dancing. You're definitely not going to like my picks against the spread. You're not going to like my watch parties. You're not going to like this show unless you're a complete college football sickle. So let me just say one more thing. The reason why I'm going to try to say this without sounding like a jerk. I'm going to try to say this without sounding like a proponent of the Big Ten Empire, the evil Big Ten Empire. I'm going to try to say this without sounding like a Southeastern Conference homer. But this is reality. The Big Ten has been able to monetize the additions of USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon through the roof. Beyond projections. Especially going into this day and age of college sports. So that is why the Big Ten has expansion plans. To be completely honest and ruthless to everybody out there, the Big Ten's latest expansion, it worked. If it would not have worked, they would be a successful conference, 18 members, and maybe someday they grow to 20. If Notre Dame would come along, we wouldn't be talking about it now. All this other stuff, they'd be fine. They would not be a sinking ship. But the problem is, is that it worked incredibly well for the current member institutions. In USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, they're seeing the benefits of it. Now, Oregon and Washington don't have full payouts, but when they get it, it's going to be huge. USC, you saw the stories about USC. Okay, making all this more money than they thought they would. All this sponsorship money, right? Everybody's bringing all this sponsorship. Michigan, there's a big story out there. In the Big Ten, it's becoming more and more and more not profitable, but more revenues just being a Big Ten member. For most of you. Some of us, it's still quite the struggle. My point is, a place in the Big Ten is more valuable than it was in 2022, in 2020, in 2010. Being a member of the SEC is more valuable than it was 10 years ago. Texas and Oklahoma have brought in the loot. They're sitting on a gold mine. This is why I did a live show. SEC sitting on a gold mine. If their past actions did not work so well for them, then they would not have these war plans out there about more expansion. They wouldn't be sitting there. They'd be sitting on the shelf, collecting dust. They're not. And they're trying to figure out what are the best moves. They keep getting more and more evaluations piled onto them. Tony Petitti's incredibly active. Greg Sankey's incredibly active. The modernization of the West Coast could not have happened under the Pac-12 umbrella. Now, the Pac-12 made mistakes. When they made the Pac-12 network, they should have got a sugar daddy, right? They should have went 50-50 with some media company, but Larry Scott wanted it all. The Pac-12 should have expanded to the Midwest. When Texas told the Pac-12, you got to bring Oklahoma with us, Pac-12 should have said, absolutely yes. Bring Oklahoma State, bring in Kansas. Let's have a central part of the Pac-12, central time zone wing of the Pac-12. The Big Ten bringing on USC, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, it works so well. It has worked so well that the Big Ten expansion list is huge. And that includes some schools west of the Mississippi River. Of course, Stanford is on there. Utah is on there. Kansas is on there. They've got to be on there. And we did a live show about a week ago where I said, look, I got to take the L here in front of all you. At least some sort of a small L. Even though we've talked about the Big Scoop SEC plans, and we have talked about the Big Scoop Big Ten plans. I've always been more on the side of a small scoop Big Ten in this next realignment wave. I know the Big Ten has gamed out the Big Scoop. But I now believe they have gamed out a Big Scoop way more seriously than I ever thought. And I took the L on that a week ago or 2 weeks ago, whatever. Success. If you do something and you're successful beyond what your projections are, you're more apt to do it and try it again. And that is the world that we're living in right now. That is what's going on right now. And I just happen to think at some point it affects Notre Dame. But anyway, okay, let's get to the article. I promise you. That is the last time I rattle on. Let's get to it right here. I do appreciate all the support, everybody coming on in here. We got 188 people in the house. There should be 188 likes. Smash the like button. I would very much appreciate it. Ross Dellenger on 3. Ross Dellenger on 3. Today, ACC schools express opposition to anti-expansion legislation in Protect the College Sports Act. Not only did they express opposition, they activated their armies. They activated some reps representing those universities to go and knock on the door of the Capitol Hill and say, no, something has got to be changed. In the days leading up to the Protect the College Sports Act failed attempt at a vote on August 8th. A few universities worked behind the scenes to convince their delegates that one specific provision in the bill needed changing. One specific provision in the bill needed changing. Officials from or representing Miami, Florida State, Clemson, and even Stanford express opposition to the anti-expansion concept in the legislation to varying degrees of severity. So, one or two of those 4 schools might have really pounded the table and said, nah, this has got to go away. And some of them might have expressed concerns. Varying degrees. Now, it is interesting that Ross Dellenger put that in there because he must have been told that there was a significant varying degrees of, representation of Miami, Florida State, and Clemson. I can tell you this. Miami and Florida State are on the very severe side of that. We reported that. You go back and look at our early peak Cloak and Dagger memory only episode, and then we went on live. We talked about the state of Florida being activated, and then later that day it was reported that the Board of Governors of the state of Florida were getting activated. So Miami and Florida State is on the severe side. In my strongly held opinion. In Clemson, well, Clemson does things the Clemson way. Clemson does things the Clemson way. They're making their voices known. They got a couple of big bully pulpits, and they're working it. They're absolutely working it. It is a button-up operation. And then Stanford, I would probably suggest, in my opinion, I would suggest that Stanford might be the one here listed that may not be completely pounding at the door, pounding at the table. But again, they are making their voices known. Stanford is an incredibly rich institution. The wealth is beyond everybody else. We're going to get back to that here in the article. I just wanted to make a couple things clear here. Stanford is, of course, independent. Hold on. We're okay. We're okay. Hold on. And they have the political space. They have the political space. They have the freedom to activate their representatives, to put pressure on their in-state legislators, on Congress. But because they're a private school, just like Miami, their influence may not be as high as your major public universities when it comes to putting pressure on Congress. Now, Miami is kind of its own ship. It does have a lot of, again, just like Clemson in a different way, Miami's got some big, heavy, they got some movers. They got people who can move the needle. They got a really good, strong backing from very powerful people. But on the whole, everything being even, a private institution is going to have less pull than the public universities on their in-state legislators, the state legislators, and in Congress. And I think everybody can understand that. Let's go back to the article. I have more things to say about that. But I would overall, and again, some of this is speculation, I would consider Miami and Florida State the most severe, then Clemson doing what Clemson does, and then Stanford making their voices known, but maybe not to the degree of Florida State and Miami. Back to the article. The concept caps power conference membership at 19 schools, and it requires schools moving from one power league to another to operate as an independent for 5 years, a probationary period that makes it more difficult for programs to change leagues. It's absolutely brutal. That 5 years probationary period, absolutely brutal. The provision produced one of the many mountain efforts against the bill that ultimately led to a delay in any vote. In fact, Senator Ashley Moody filed an amendment to the expansion provision that would permit schools to avoid the probationary period if they move leagues within 180 days of the bill's enactment. Important note, an amendment must garner enough supported votes to be accepted. So Ashley Moody wanted a 180 days for realignment to occur before that probationary period of 5 years being an independent would take an effect. So what does this all mean? In short, again, Ross Dellenger. In short, the expansion provision may need to undergo an overhaul. But before we dive into that situation, and Ross Dellenger does dive into it, so everybody be patient, everybody buckle up, everybody strap in. We should update everyone on the situation with the legislation. As part of an agreement reached with the Senate leadership, the Protect the College Sports Act is scheduled to reach the Senate floor for a vote when lawmakers return from a 5-week break the week of September 14th. This isn't some flimsy handshake agreement. Senate Majority Leader John Thune presumably struck a deal to bring the act to the floor in September in exchange for supportive votes from the bill co-authors, Senator Cruz, Schmidt, and Cantwell, over other legislation that already eventually passed on August 8th, the final day before the chamber broke for its recess. So, Ross Dellenger is basically reporting that there is going to be a vote on this in the Senate. There's going to be a vote on the Protect the College Sports Act. Supporters of the bill continue to hold confidence in reaching the 60-vote margin to advance from the Senate to the House of Representatives. There is less confidence that the House will hurriedly pass the act without serious deliberation and amendments. All right. Now, let's get to it. Speaking of the amendments, the Act's co-authors and staff are working to modify the legislation in an effort to ensure they gain as much support as possible in the Senate. So they are working on it right now, ladies and gentlemen. And at the center of the modifications, not on the edge, at the center is likely the expansion provision. Nothing's been finalized. Nothing is written in concrete here. But there are suggestions of decreasing the 5-year probationary period or eliminating the provision 5 years after the bill's enactment. This would permit schools to freely move leagues by 2031 if the bill is enacted into law this year. There are suggestions of decreasing the 5-year probationary period. So, instead of 5 years, maybe it'd be 3 years. Maybe it will be 2 years. Or eliminating the provision 5 years after the bill has passed. What does that mean? After this article was published, I poked and prodded. Everything being equal, it has been suggested to me that if you put Clemson and Florida State and all these schools into a room and you said, pick your poison, a decrease in the probationary period where you might have to go independent for 2 to 3 years and then be able to jump to a P2 conference, or after 5 years of passage, you are free to go to another P2 conference. No conference cap, no probationary period. Everything is gone after 5 years. Take your poison. It has been told to me that these schools would most likely choose, let's do this in 5 years. Now, before everybody gets upset with that, obviously the people that I talk with are they're not infallible, but they're quite let me back up. That the probationary period of going independent, it's terrible. It is a poison pill that is poisonous. Like, really poison. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to go independent for a couple of years and then jump possibly to another conference. By the time you do all that and you recover from that, if you do recover from that, it's 2030, 31 anyways. If the probationary period goes from 5 to 2 to 3 years. If you only had those two options, it has been suggested to me that most likely the schools would say, all right, in 5 years, we can start a moving. Now, 5 years, I know a lot of people are going to be looking like that. We don't got 5 years. If we're Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, Virginia, other schools, we want to jump now or 2 years from now with none of these hamstrings, with none of these handcuffs. But if you had the option of one of the two, it sounds like the schools would rather have just have the clock, have the probationary period, and the conference cap be completely eliminated by 2030-31. Now, what would that mean? Or eliminating the provision 5 years after the bill's enactment. This would permit schools to freely move leagues by 2031. What would that mean? Well, number one, it would give the Big Ten a lot of leverage, more than they have now. It would give the SEC a lot of leverage than they have now. Because I think the Big Ten would probably act in 2029-30, and the school would move to the new conference in 31. Like, I think that would fit in the wheelhouse of the Big Ten. I think it would fit in the wheelhouse of the SEC. Also, there's something that's really important. And it's a big, big, giant if. It's a big, giant if. If that part of the bill was changed to where the 5-year probationary period was eliminated in 2031. In other words, there probably wouldn't be any movement for 4 or 5 years. That would be the ultimate dream scenario for Kansas, for Utah, for any other possible Big 12 school that is looking to make a jump from a Power 4 conference to another. Jump into the Big 10, jump into the SEC, even possibly jump into the ACC, because the Big 12 grant of rights would be over by then, or coming to a close by then, when the Big 10 and the SEC would make their decisions. So that part of the possible change in the amendment, that would be in favor of some of those Big 12 schools. I want to get to the super chat. I want to talk more about this here. Everybody, hold on. We got Charlemagne, $5 holla. Charlemagne, thank you very much. Charlemagne, people forget how powerful Stanford is. With their influence in Washington, the politicians get money from the billionaire alumni base. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Charlemagne, for the reminder. Absolutely true. Which brings into a report that we delivered to you all. BTM, we've said this a few times, BTM, with an associate director in the Big Ten. The associate director told BTM more than once, Big Ten is looking to expand in wealthy schools in wealthy locations. Simple as that. Now, it's not as simple as that, but that is how this associate director told BTM. He said that last year at Indianapolis for the Big Ten Conference Championship game, we delivered you that information. There was other things said that we are embargoed on wealthy markets, wealthy schools, and Stanford is right there. Having said that, right? Let's talk about Stanford. Let's talk about Stanford. As we reported to you in real time on X and at College Football Peek Around the Corner in 2022, we did not believe that Stanford and California had a shot. We did not think that was going to work. It ultimately did not work. If the Big Ten is going to add 2 schools, let's say they're only going to add 2 schools. Next year, 2 years from now, it is my strongly held opinion at Peek Around the Corner, there is literally no chance it's going to be a Stanford-California combination. I don't know how that did not move the needle for Fox. Something that Fox did not want to do. That does not help Oregon and Washington. They would get, Stanford would take it, California would take it. They would take it 30 cents on the dollar, while Oregon and Washington are taking 50 cents on the dollar. But that blend, that is not a blend. California is one of the top 3 public institutions in the country. UCLA, 1 or 2. California, 1 or 2. Stanford, of course. I mean, you cannot deny any of that. But for the Big Ten, it's about the blend. That's not the blend. We talk about Georgia Tech, right? We've had a couple of conversations about Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, for everything they got going for them, they are going to need their own Oregon, their own Oklahoma. They're going to need a big football brand to blend in with Georgia Tech. Everything that Georgia Tech's got going for them, they're going to need that blend. They're going to need a big football. They're going to need a Miami. They're going to need a Clemson. They're going to need a Florida State. They're going to need a Notre Dame. They're going to need that big football brand to get into the Big Ten. Stanford, they're going to need a big football brand to get in the Big Ten. Google the following. Big Ten Network, they got really good coverage in the state of California, even Northern California. Even Northern California. Look it up. Stanford, the Big Ten presidents would walk over shattered glass to get Stanford in the conference. But there's got to be something else. And if Notre Dame is still not willing to move, it's Stanford and something. What is the other something? If it's happening within the next couple of years, it's got to be Stanford plus an ACC big football brand. But then again, if the Big Ten does its big scoop, well, then you can have 3 Southeastern Conference teams in Stanford, or 2 Southeastern Conference teams in Stanford and Notre Dame. However that would work. But a small scoop of Stanford and California, I did not believe in 2022. I do not believe it now. I don't think as well as the Big Ten has been able to monetize the Pacific Coast, I would be shocked if California and Stanford came together. Now California can come in, but they're going to have to have their own blend. Washington and Oregon just got into the Big Ten. Oregon is a massive brand. Massive. Washington is a good brand, way above average. Incredible institution. The rivalry of Oregon and Washington, they brought so much to the table, and yet they got 50 cents on the dollar because it wasn't the right time for the Big Ten, the conference, to negotiate for them versus their immediate partners. So if you're looking at an expansion in early 2027 and it's Stanford and somebody, woo! It can't be Stanford in California, in my opinion. Let me know how wrong I got it, but I don't think so. It would have to be a Stanford or Miami or a Stanford or Clemson or Stanford. It's got to be something huge on the other end of it. The Big Ten presidents would walk over shattered glass, barefooted, in the middle of winter to get Stanford in the Big Ten. They would. But even that, Stanford needs something to help them get in. Every school does, except if you are Notre Dame and North Carolina. And North Carolina is out of reach at this point, and Notre Dame is out of reach at this point. So every other school we talk about when it comes to Big Ten expansion needs something else to happen for them. And this is our Holy Smokes Theater update on July 24th. Those are the tiers. Now we are going to be making some moves, some adjustments on that. The Southeastern Conference is a lot easier. If they can free up a North Carolina and Virginia, we think they are in. But there are hurdles to that. Both of them are very unique hurdles, North Carolina and Virginia. Clemson and Florida State, I think that's the grease that has to be laid down for the skids to work. And then you got a Miami, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, and Kansas. I'm going to tell you something right now. When we do the Holy Smokes Theater update for Saturday, there might be one change in the SEC candidate tier list. There's going to be multiple ones in the Big Ten. Multiple changes. Thank you, Charmaline. I appreciate the $5 holler. Let me check if I've fallen behind. No, I haven't. Let me get to your phone calls. I got one more thing to say on this. Before we get to your phone calls. We got to remember, we got to put this in perspective. This rattling of the cages by Clemson and the Florida State, and a Miami, all happening after the elevated talks have happened. I think even more importantly, the rattling of the cages by Florida State, Clemson, and Miami has all happened after it was publicly reported by Ross Dellenger that the elevated talks were happening. Now, we reported it a week before Dellenger, but nobody's listening to us here at Peek Around the Corner. We're a bunch of nobodies. But Ross Dellenger reported it. But yet, Florida State and Clemson and Miami have the perception, and the Florida State Money Purchase told us, very positive, they went ahead and they had their reps, people representing them, or officials of their schools, knocking on the doors of in-state legislators in Congress to make sure that Section 205 gets rearranged. I think that means a whole hell of a lot. Even up until this point. There are certain schools that are pressing all the buttons because their perception is all we need is that opportunity. All we need is that opportunity, and we're going to make the jump. Now, again, their perception might be incorrect. Some school may be reading it all wrong. But this is after elevated talks. Elevated talks means the following. There may only be those last moments of negotiations left. That's what we've been told. Talks have been exhausted. You might still have negotiations left to do, no question about it. Like those last 24 hours, there's still some unsettling business that has to get done. Where when we report to things are imminent, you still have that last bit of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But elevated talks at this point, they've been going on for months, and then they went to elevated talks. Early 2027, and maybe before that, I think we're going to be on the very precipice of being able to come in here in the studio and finally to say things are imminent. Just like we said with USC, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. Early 2027. Now, one of the things that could change all of that is, let's say this bill does get passed. We're pretending here. Let's say this bill does get passed. With the 5-year probationary period in it, but yet it goes away in 2030-31. That's a big if. But let's say that is the bill and it passes and gets signed by Trump. Then we're going to be on pause. The position is not going to be on pause, but the realignment, the next wave of realignment is definitely going to be on pause because nobody's going to want to go into that probationary period. Anyways, now let's get to your phone calls, your super chats. The phone lines are open 763-260-1333-763-260-1333. Let me know what you're thinking. I appreciate Tungate, Henderson, Huda, Williams, Berman, and Charlemagne for your generosity. Very much appreciated. As you know, if you give us a call, the floor is entirely yours. If you give us a super chat, the floor is entirely yours. We got our first phone call.
From
Rick?
Rick is on the line. The floor is yours, sir. How you doing?
Doing well, you?
Doing good. I got a busy evening ahead of me. I'm gonna be taking care of the 93-year-old mother, the Alabama fan. So we're gonna have some fun watching TV and eating some cream of corn. But go ahead, sir.
Oh, good stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
She's got a big season ahead. This is a impactful year for the.
Yeah. My mother's got to get it. She's got to get it together. She's got to get focused. No question about it.
Yeah, the Crimson Tide can go either way this year.
Yeah.
We're all going to be watching to see which way it goes.
Yeah.
Hey, you remember me calling up about 6 months ago?
Sure.
And making a point about Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, and how it's important that they not surrender the control that they have in having influence in who tags along with them.
Yeah.
Should they go to the Big Ten?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Because let's say the number X for the Big Ten is 20. Well, if that's the case, of course they want Notre Dame and whoever Notre Dame picks, and then they're done. But if the number is X is 22, and that's more realistic, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it's 24 because that's a big number. Yep. But if it's 22, I was of the opinion that Notre Dame could pick, say, okay, we want Stanford, but because we're moving early and we're so strong, we want another school too. And in a case like that, the Big Ten would say, well, we'd love to have you, and Stanford's a wonderful pick, but it would depend on who you wanted for that other team, whether or not it was on our list too. But Notre Dame would have influence.
You would think so, yes.
If they wait around, if Notre Dame waits around too long, 2 of the 4 spots in a 22-team league could get filled without them.
Yes.
And that would leave them with only 1 pick to tag along with them. So I'm thinking Notre Dame needs to make the move now. Because they can say, okay, we want Stanford, and we want, we'll just use Georgia Tech. And the Big Ten says, gosh darn it, we wanted you and Stanford and Miami. And I said, no, we want Georgia Tech. So the Big Ten would kind of say, well, God darn it, we'll take them all. But if the Big Ten took Miami and Georgia Tech ahead of time, then Notre Dame would be forced to pick probably 1. What do you think of that?
I agree. I mean, in fact, we reported at the time that when USC and UCLA, when it became official, they were joining the Big Ten, USC were in talks with Notre Dame to try to get them to join the Big Ten. And one of the arguments that USC was making is the earlier you come in, the bigger voice you have in creating the future of the Big Ten and how you would want it. That was USC's selling point to Notre Dame. Not the economics part of it. Not all, the part was the earlier you come in, starting right now, the better off you will be in being able to form the type of last pieces to the conference. The later you go, if you're the last one in the boat, you don't have a voice. So that is part of the argument towards Notre Dame. So I think you've nailed it, Rick. You've absolutely nailed it.
What do you think X is?
Reframe that question. Excess in
The number of teams that the Big Ten is going to max out at.
I think 22 is definitely in play. And I'm guessing just because the number 24 works so well, 24 probably is in play. I would probably say 24, but not necessarily that they would get to 24. I think 22 definitely is in play. Maybe not this wave, although I think it is, but eventually 22 definitely is in play.
Well, then that kind of knocks the old tennis ball back in Notre Dame's court.
Yeah.
Do you want to bring two teams along with you, or are you okay with just bringing one? Because if it's 24, they can wait around and stay independent until it goes to 22.
Yeah.
No, they'll have the 23rd spot, and they can pick the 24th. But if they do it early, they can bring two friends along. Okay, great show. Thanks.
I appreciate it, Rick. Beautiful call, sir. Beautiful call. Excellent. Grateful Trojan. Interesting comment. If the Big Ten is making every... Hold on.
Call from
Mohr Simmons.
Mohr Simmons, Mr. Seminole. Can you hold on for just one moment, please?
Yes.
I appreciate it, Mr. Simmons. Grateful Trojan. Interesting comment. If the Big Ten is making every decision based on Notre Dame's wish list, which I hope they're not doing, but, you know, everybody bends the knee at Notre Dame for whatever reason. If the Big Ten is making every decision based on Notre Dame's wish list, the four would be Stanford, Miami, Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame. That is probably correct. That is a very interesting comment. Maybe, now look, that's probably correct. I think, California, of course, could be another California school. Would probably be something that Notre Dame would be interested along with Stanford. I think if Notre Dame could swing it somehow, maybe a Clemson, because Notre Dame and Clemson have a tight relationship. But overall, everything being considered, I think those four, I think that's a really good comment. But hopefully the Big Ten is not doing everything by Notre Dame wish list. My goodness. How embarrassing, Big Ten. Thank you, Grateful Trojan. Mohr Simmons, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir, for calling. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, I'm Greg. I'm trying to make this quick. And
you got it.
Also, I said something on the subject maybe around about 2 or 3 shows back, and maybe it was twisted some kind of way, but you touched on this show that Florida State greased the wheel. I mentioned that around about 2 to 3 shows back, and I ain't gonna call the person out in the group, but they was very adamant about UNC, and I stated, I said, look, two things could be right at the same time. Yes, that the SEC wants UNC. Okay, that's fine. But you also got to look at the media partner. The media partner is not going to pay SEC money just for UNC and Virginia. That ain't moving the needle when it comes to value for the media partner, ESPN. Now, truth be told, and you said this more than one or two occasions, FSU agrees the will for UNC or anybody else that want to come into the SEC. You will have to have a big brand to come in there for that media partner to be satisfied, because they're the one who paying the conference.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be hand in hand, whoever come in there, but just to outright say that, well, UNC and Virginia go right on in and they don't need no Will Greaves. They are the Will degrees. No, I don't understand how people come to that conclusion, because ESPN is not going to pay just for them two schools come in by themselves. Sure, the SEC may say, okay, I want them, but okay, what's the payout going to be?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'm trying to tell people in the chat, I understand you want North Carolina, fine, but they would need help to come in, somebody that's going to grease the wheel, just like you said, Florida State, Clemson, Miami. Them are schools that grease wheels for a lot of schools.
Yeah,
So
for
that's
me,
what I would say. All right, I'm
okay.
go ahead and get off the phone and hear the rest of the commentary.
You got it, buddy.
Right.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Simmons.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Now, maybe I should be probably a little bit more clear. I know it's semantics, but it isn't so much that I believe that an addition of North Carolina and Virginia to the SEC needs a Florida State and North Carolina to grease the skids to get it done. Because remember, ESPN's got to offer pro rata to North Carolina and Virginia, or they have to offer pro rata to the SEC. Now, how SEC distributes their money is up to them. Would they get a full freight to Virginia, North Carolina? Probably would, but then again, it's not. I don't think there is no contractual obligation. That's between the negotiations between North Carolina SEC, Virginia SEC. Pro rata, yes, to the conference, but not necessarily full freight. Like when the ACC added SMU, the conference got pro rata, but SMU did not get a dime. I mean, they're getting money from the ACC network, but SMU is not getting any tier 1 media money. California and Stanford, 30 cents on the dollar. The rest of the money is going to the ACC coffers, and they're distributing the rest of the money to the other ACC schools. So, the Southeastern Conference could add a North Carolina, they could add a Virginia, and they could do the small scoop without taking a Florida State and Clemson, and everything would be okay. But my argument...
From
Movie Time Blues.
Movie Time Blues, can you just hold for a moment, please?
Sure.
I appreciate it. My argument is the future projection payouts of the SEC. So, in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, they're sitting there. They know how much they're making this year, next year, the next year. They know the new media, that's the money that's coming in for the next playoff distribution. They know what it would look like somewhat, somehow with the 2014 playoffs. They have all these projections, right? And a projection of a North Carolina and a Virginia is not going to dilute the shares of any school for now until 2030, 31, 32, whenever they do their look-in and whenever the SEC does their next contract, and they might wait to 2034. I don't think so. So North Carolina and Virginia are not going to dilute anybody, but a North Carolina-Virginia addition might dilute a little bit into the future of a Georgia slice, of an Alabama slice. And it might hinder the media. This is more important. It doesn't probably advance the future plans of ESPN when it comes to ad buys and eyeballs and possible bringing on another platform and some partnership with sponsorship, whatever, all these plans going on. And North Carolina and Virginia only additions might dilute a little bit the ability of ESPN to market SEC. Not a whole bunch, but a little bit. The additions of a Florida State and Clemson, I believe, greases the skids for it. It helps the North Carolina and Virginia football content not to dilute the future earnings of a Georgia, of an Alabama, of a Tennessee. So just to clarify, I don't think the SEC needs Florida State and Clemson to grease the skids for a near-term expansion of the conference. But I think when they look at future projections, also not having Big Ten have the opportunity to add a Florida State and a Miami, a Florida State and a Clemson, because you saw how well the Big Ten has monetized the Pacific Coast. My goodness. So, all right. Hopefully I've answered that question. A lot of ins and outs out of that. Movie Time Blues, thank you so very much. Appreciate you calling. The floor is yours. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Good afternoon. You mentioned what could a blend work with Stanford. Now, the way I'm looking, remember way back during the Marin and Rutgers ads, they weren't so much an athletic blend, but they were basically a market blend. Now, remember, the Stanford has a relationship with Duke University.
Yes, sir.
Now, Duke University is situated in the state of North Carolina. If the Big Ten were to get into the state of North Carolina, that'll be a large market ad.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you're thinking of Stanford and Duke type of situation here, right?
Right, and they have a close relationship. And also, the research dollars is massive between those two.
Yeah, but how does wouldn't you have to I mean, but that blend doesn't work either, though. You would have to add a Florida State, a Clemson, a Miami, a Notre Dame. You'd have to add something in that pot. You can't. I don't think you can do a Stanford and Duke and get CBS and NBC on board. My opinion.
Well, maybe if it's part of a 4-team expansion, it might work.
Sure. Yes. Sure.
So then if you get to 3 new states and then a Stanford, then it might work. I'm just I'm guessing, but the research dollars alone makes it very intriguing for the Big Ten.
Oh yeah, yes, without question. The Big Ten presidents, absolutely, without question.
So if there's a big scoop, that could be the big scoop. If we get a Georgia Tech with a Miami as part of the big scoop, then it might work.
Yes. A Miami, Georgia Tech, Duke, and Stanford.
Yeah, because that's the program. It's the states, brand 3 new states, and Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, I guess possibly. I don't know though. I don't know if now. I don't know if that blend works.
Well, so it's something to think about.
Yeah, it is.
Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you go now.
I appreciate it, sir. Beautiful movie time blues. Beautiful call.
All right. Okay.
K. Nguyen. K says BYU by 3 over Notre Dame. Oh my God! Oh my God! My oh my oh my. K comes in with the hammer. The Cougars 3 over the Irish. Again, if you give us a call, the floor is yours. 763-260-1333. We do have some breaking news. ESPN reports that Oklahoma and coach Brent Venables have agreed to a new 6-year contract, $10.5 million per year. Breaking news.
From
Grateful Trojan.
Grateful Trojan is on the line. Thanks for calling, sir. The floor is yours.
Hey, Greg, how are you?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you? Thanks for calling. I appreciate it, sir.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me. Hey, I get a bad reception every now and then, so if I drop you, I apologize.
No problem.
So I was kind of listening, the last caller, he was talking about Georgia Tech, Stanford, Miami, and Duke. And I can kind of see that, but I think what would happen with that would also be a scheduling agreement with Notre Dame and an ACC-like scheduling agreement with Notre Dame. And if the Big Ten's making every future decision based on Notre Dame,
yeah,
which I actually think they are.
Yeah.
They're gonna placate to them.
Yeah.
Until they finally join. I think they're willing to do a six game agreement with them as well, just to get that started. And you have enough teams or schools in the Big Ten that you can rotate that, go to a 10-game conference schedule, and the 6 schools that would play Notre Dame would be rotated. There's you already know who they would go through, but the other schools would probably go with an SEC agreement as well, and then it would be one, G6 or whatever Big 12 remainder of ACC schools, and that would be a huge TV contract. That would be ginormous, and I think it's possible. I really think it's possible. And as far as that fourth one being Duke, with Duke pretty much buying their way in and also helping the basketball. I mean, they're going to sell arenas everywhere they go. And they're going to be, probably on Friday Night Football, or there's a slot for them that will be created.
And them buying themselves in probably would elevate an Oregon and Washington payout, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of it kind of makes sense to me, really. I think that's 22 seems to be the number, with the last two holding out for the last two spots to go to 24. We'll be waiting and seeing on Notre Dame once again.
Yeah. It could be. All right. Any thoughts on USC football this year? I'm very high on them. I guaranteed a playoff. I guaranteed that early in the spring. I'm keeping to that. What do you think, Grateful Trojan?
I think it's a prove it year. I think we've built a Big Ten level offensive line and defensive line. And I think with the Gary Patterson addition, I think we're there's 4 games on the schedule that are pretty much circled, and including that whiteout Penn State game. And I think if we go 2-2 in that in the 4 games, we're playoff bound. Which I think I'd prefer going 3-1 in that scenario, but I think there's a good chance that we're actually playing for the Big Ten championship. I think people are underrating Maeva. Yeah. I think there's definitely we're underrated as far as all the returning players. That we have so much coming back. Plus, what we brought in with our freshman class, and they're ready to go. They're ready to go, freshmen. They're plug and play body types. They're huge. We have. Wait until you see USC on TV. The size of USC is gonna actually surprise a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Our offensive line's 315 plus easy. Our defensive line's just huge. And what people keep forgetting about is Jakeem Stewart. He played with a broken foot for the majority of the last year, and he was disruptive with the broken foot. And I think he's going to have a huge year. And you pair him with Wafel, the true freshman defensive end. We have other defensive ends that I think need to step up and actually hit home and get to the quarterback. And if we do that, and then we stop the big runs. There are too many times where you're seeing 6-7 yard runs on a consistent basis. We need to slow that down, and I think if that's done, then we're going to make some noise.
Mm-hmm. All right, I agree with you, sir. I absolutely agree with you. I think this is going to be a fun year, a dramatic year, a tense year for the USC Trojan fan base. I appreciate you calling. Do not wait this long to call again, sir. All right?
All right, thanks a lot, Greg.
You got it, buddy.
Great show.
Yep, thank you. We've got more breaking news. This time, not all that good. Pete Knackles on 3 reports Kansas State starting left tackle John Pastor is set to miss the 2026 college football season due to a lower body injury. Preseason All Big 12 first team selection. The Kansas State Wildcats lose their first team All Big 12 left tackle John Pastore. Brutal news. Brutal news for the Kansas State Wildcats. Terrible news for Avery Johnson. My goodness. That is heartbreaking. Brandon Marcello is calling it a big loss. Big loss for Kansas State. That's terrible. That is terrible. All right. Let's see if there's any other stuff going on here. Phone lines. I do want to thank Charmaline, Noel Berman, Marcus Williams, Christopher Hooter, Helmer Henderson, Ricky Tungate for your super chats, for your new memberships. I very much appreciate it. I want to thank the phone calls that came on in. Beautiful phone calls once again from PATC family. And I think that's it. I think we're going to wrap it up. We've been on the air for 2 hours. There could be a possibility that we come on late tonight. If not, we're going to be coming on Friday, August 21st, because that's another great day to talk college football. I do appreciate you all joining us. We came on a little bit early to cover this breaking news, cover this Ross Dellenger article. Florida State, Miami, Stanford, and Clemson use their representation, use reps, officials, to push to get that anti-expansion provision in the PCSA changed or completely ripped apart. Big news from Ross Dellenger. If you just joined us, if you missed it, go back at the beginning and watch it all. Big news. What does it all mean? We'll talk about it more again either tonight or tomorrow. Keep your head on a swivel. Make sure you subscribe. Get yourself notified. Until next time, from all of us at PATC, to all of you, please, y'all take great care of each other. And as always, God, family,